All right, I am going to show you how you can easily spawn a Niagara crowd. So we've been spawning instant static meshes up until now, but I'm going to show you how to do Niagara, and it's all hooked up with a bunch of cool features ready to go. You'll see that the wardrobe interface has changed a little bit. We've just kind of moved some buttons around, and we got rid of that like fountain button, because you don't need it anymore. And down here, you'll see in the animation sources, you'll see that each animation has this new option, which is has root motion. Okay, and if I open up these animations, so I've gone ahead and added a few of these animations to this wardrobe because this is how we're going to make the Niagara crowd move around. So you want root motion animations like this. And I'll explain more of that in a minute and where you can get animations like that. But you'll want to check that has root motion is on when you bake them. And I'll show you why in a second. But first, I'm going to spawn in a Niagara crowd. So this is super easy. Over here under placement group where it says default, we just click on that and we switch it to Niagara. And in this case, I have a populate scene spline set up. So I'm just going to go ahead and plop that down. Don't worry about these errors over here. That's just on my computer. And boom, just like that. So that is a Niagara crowd right there. And you'll see right here, this is actually the emitter. And it's all set up, and it has some great functions down here, some modules that we will go over in a second. And but yeah, that is a Niagara crowd completely ready to go. And if we come over here, we can select our spline here, and you still have your populate scene spline just like that right up there. And if you click up here, you can select the actual Niagara blueprint here. And if you look at that, that has the Niagara crowd system down in here, which is this thing here. So this pops up when you spawn your Niagara crowd. And so this is your Niagara emitter inside of your Niagara system that is controlling this crowd. Okay, so why don't we edit our crowd here a little bit, and you can see you can do it just the same as you would with the default placement group. So over here, I've got the spline selected, and let's see, we can change our number of rows to, let's just do 20, and I want to actually make this a little bit bigger here. We'll kind of make it look like they're in a formation or something like that. Good, and then I'm going to come back here and make sure I have the spline or the blueprint selected. And under number of characters, let's just change it to 20. It's probably not going to fit 20 on there, but we'll do that anyway. And then let's see, number of rows I have set to 20. And then you can just hit populate the same way as you would with the default groups. And then you have to refresh the Niagara emitter up here. So you can populate using this button here, and that will populate and refresh just like that. But you can also use this refresh button if you don't want to actually repopulate the entire thing like I just did there. So you can hit refresh, and actually that will bring up your Niagara emitter just like that, which is really useful. So, just like we would spawn in our default groups, these guys are going to be just playing all of the animations, that we set up over here in the wardrobe. They're going to be playing those automatically. And then, in here, they're all, this is where they're selected to spawn in. So if we wanted to say if we wanted these guys to all just be standing around idling instead of, playing these running in place animations, we would just go and remove all of these except for the idle. So why don't we just do that really quickly? Just delete those, delete. Great. And then let's come over here and hit this refresh button. And then let's make sure we actually repopulate now that we've affected the populate scene spline. Let's hit that button there. And there we go. So that refreshed all of the placement nodes so that they would all be assigned to idle, and then refresh the Niagara emitter as well. So there we go. We've got these guys kind of looking like they're about to start marching somewhere. And really quickly, I'm going to show you how you can get some movement going in a crowd. I'm not going to get these guys moving in this tutorial. I'm going to show you that in the next one on how you can make, like an idling group start moving. So I'm going to just show you how you can get, a basic crowd going with a little bit of movement to it. So let's pull up our wardrobe editor, and I'm going to spawn in a box here. And we've got our Niagara selected there. Come down here and just plop that down right there. And there is our emitter. Great. And let's go ahead and expand this. I'm just going to add a few more guys to this. Let's see. Let's do 100. Great. Populate that, and let's make sure to refresh our Niagara system. So as you can see, we have some of our walking animations back in there, and you're probably wondering, like, how do those guys move around using the root motion? And I will show you that. We can bring up our Niagara emitter, so I'm just going to hit that refresh button. So that'll bring that up, and let's zoom in here and take a look at what we got here. What we want to do is we want to click on this apply root motion data. So that's grayed out. Let's check that. And then under texture user parameter, let's select weapon and shield to our wardrobe. And boom, you'll see those guys are starting to run off in all sorts of directions. Okay, I went ahead and expanded the area quite a bit here, so I'll just refresh our system here, and there they go. They're going off running, and you can see we've got the guys with the slower walks are walking slower. The running guys are obviously running very quickly, and everything in between. Here you can see this guy's got a limp, and there's a little bit of some sort of twitchy motion, and that's because the way we're tracking the root motion is it's not quite perfect yet. We haven't quite gotten it perfect, but we have some solutions for that coming soon. But for now, this is a pretty great way to get your crowd moving around. And, they're just going to move at the speed that their animation is moving at, So if you wanted characters to move slower or faster, you would just give them animations that match, are going at that speed, and that will, make sure that you have nice foot locking and everything looks really natural with the movement of your crowd characters. All right, so let's maybe set up our spline so all these characters don't just keep wandering off into the distance there. So let's come over here, and this is the spline system that we spawned in earlier. This is our our Niagara system. Let's grab the spline here, and let's see. Let's move it out. We're just gonna give we're just gonna draw kind of like a big loop for our characters to sort of follow here. Let's see, I'll kind of pull this out and this out. And let's see, actually, before I finish doing that spline, okay, I'm going to show you how to make these guys follow the spline. So let's pull up our Niagara emitter again. So again, just kind of quick little shortcut there to bring that up. And let's zoom in here. We want to click on get best spline direction. So check that, turn that on, and then over here under spline user parameter, we want to select our wardrobe, select the spline right there. We'll select that, great. And now you'll see right away, these guys are starting to follow the spline. And what they're doing is they're kind of moving to a point that is, closest to the, they're following a sort of, tangent to the spline. And right now we don't have any great collisions set up, so they're all kind of just mushing together, so to speak. And then, over here at the end, they're starting to clump up here. But why don't we get this spline, more in a loop here? We'll start dragging that off. And let's see, I kind of want to actually... So actually, this spline and this, this Niagara emitter is controlling all of, these characters, right? And, you can still put down different placement groups, right? Like we put down this box, and then we put down this spline, and, you can control, the animations that those get spawned in with in these populate scene, volumes or splines. But, any changes that we make to our Niagara emitter is going to affect, all of the characters in this scene. But let's see. First, let's see here. Let's just select the end of the spline there, and then over here I'm going to select closed loop, and there we go. That just makes it a loop. I'll just kind of drag it out like that. The other thing that I really want to make sure we cover in this video are the interparticle collisions, or the neighbor grids. So that will really help you get a lot more, sort of natural looking crowd movement. So I'll show you. The nice thing is that it's actually all set up already. This is one of the great things about Overcrowd is, this can be kind of tricky to set up, but we do it all for you. So, and it's actually already turned on. We don't have the visualizer in here by default, so we are going to add that. But for now, we want to turn on our neighbor grid visualizer. So right click and click Add Emitter, and just search for Debug, and select that. And let's go ahead and take a look here. All right, that is what our neighbor grid is starting to look like. So you'll see there's these individual cells, and they have these numbers over them. That's displaying the number of characters inside of that cell. And if it's red, it means that there's too many, and some of the collisions are going to stop working. And if it's white, it means that it's not overloaded, and they're all able to avoid each other. So if we select, I'll come over here up to our Niagara crowd emitter here, I'll select that, and let's select the crowd system in here, and you'll see, let me zoom out here. You can see now this yellow boundary. This is showing the boundary of our neighbor grid. So, as they move out of here, they have no more collisions at all. So you can expand that over here. So remember, you have, select your Niagara crowd spline, and then in here, make sure you select the crowd system, and then down here you'll see the grid size. So it's 10,000 by default. Let's change it to 20,000 on the X and Y. All right, and then that's obviously going to make our cells bigger because we do not change the number of cells. So we can change that down here, and I kind of want smaller cells. I want more smaller cells. So let's do like 40 by 40. Okay, and that's going to create some pretty small cells, but that means we can keep this number, the max number of neighbors allowed in the cell. We can keep that number relatively low. I'm going to make it a little higher. I think the better I think what gets better performance is to actually have, smaller grids, or have more grids that are handling, fewer interparticle collisions. But so these guys are actually all aware of each other, but they're not going to be, moving around each other or moving out of the way very much. The way we set that up is to bring up our Niagara emitter. And once that loads, let's zoom in here. And we want to go to offset character position. Okay, so yeah, now they're not moving out of each other's way at all because that's turned off. Let's enable that, turn that on, and now we want to actually turn this number, this true float, we want to turn that way down. I find something like 0.002 works pretty well. And then, of course, anytime you make a change to your emitter, make sure you come back in here and refresh using this refresh button here. And let's see how that's looking now. Okay, we should be getting some, some proper avoidance now. They should have a little bit of force to kind of like, move them out of each other's way. And, right now, this is still in the works a little bit. It is in need of some refinement. You'll see, if they get a little too close to each other, they might kind of slide a little bit to the side. And, you can turn that, that true float down. If we come back in here, let's take a look at that offset character position. And, you could set it to 0.001, for example, and now they'll be a lot closer to each other, maybe to the point that they start kind of clipping through each other, although they will still have a decent amount of sort of avoidance of each other. It just might be a little closer, and if that number goes too high, they're going to start kind of teleporting and sort of twitching away from each other. So you want to make sure you don't go too high. Like, I think 0.005, is probably the peak of what looks natural, but you're going to start to get a lot of, kind of sliding to the side. But as I said, that's something we're going to refine, maybe make them turn in the direction of their velocity. We'll see how that goes. There's lots of things that can be done there to make that look better. So why don't we turn the visualizer off here really quick. I'm going to come up here and then just uncheck the debug thing there. There is another visualizer you can turn on here. If you come down under render and turn on debug renderer, you'll see these these white lines kind of showing which characters are avoiding each other, and it's kind of like a cool other visualizer you can take a look at. But I'm going to go ahead and actually just disable that really quick. So we'll go ahead and do that. Great. And like I was saying before, this emitter that we've been playing with, that affects all of the characters, that are spawned in, including this other placement group here. So I'm going to show you, let's see if we come over here and select that. I can go ahead and add some more animations to this. So if I come here and add under idle, let's go and open up our animations here, and I'll just add this one walking animation there. And then if I bring up, actually, why don't we just come up here and hit populate, and then we'll refresh the Niagara emitter. And there we go. That's going to spawn in some walking guys, and they're just going to immediately start going off and following the spline there, just like that. And so there you go. That's how you can make some dynamic crowd movement. And we're going to get way more into all the different tools, including how you can change their animations using our point of interest volumes, and add multiple splines and add points of interest for them to travel to, and kind of moving to more precise points. One thing I want to show you really quick is you can adjust how closely they follow the spline, or rather from what distance they will follow the spline. So, you know, if you come in here and we go to get best spline direction, you can change the attraction distance. Okay, so right now the default is 1,000, and if we change it to say 2,000, let's do 2,000, and then, you know, make sure we refresh. That's going to make it so, you know, they can follow, you know, further away from the spline. You know, so if you're moving guys in like a formation, you know, like, okay, so them turning around a corner this tight is not going to work very well with them all going the exact same speed. But, you know, you can see they're, you know, going to follow at kind of like a farther radius from the spline. So that's a way you can kind of play with that. You know, if you need them to follow like, you know, more narrower, like along, if they need to follow a narrower path, like on a road or something, you know, then you would, you know, set this to maybe like 500 or something like that. Like let's try 300 and see what that looks like. Great. Yeah, so now they should be following, you know, pretty narrowly there. Yeah, there you go. Looks pretty cool, actually. Except for that, you know, that's going to happen, you know, if you've got a large group kind of going around a tight corner. So, you know, you'll want to play with the settings to kind of get something looking as natural as possible. But all right, that's enough for this tutorial.